He swore under oath that the FBI would never be politicized, that there would be no retribution, no revenge, no bending of justice for political favor. But when Senator Chris Coons stared him down across the Senate floor, that promise began to fall apart. Because in that moment, Kash Patel wasn't just facing questions, he was facing himself. The same words he once used to assure America of his integrity were now being turned back on him, exposing a story far bigger than any single exchange. What Coons revealed wasn't just about one man.
Is we at the FBI are in support of the president's budget, and we are in support of eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. We've already identified tens of millions of dollars of duplicative contracts that the FBI was spending on software and private sector engagements. We've also identified duplicative workloads. So we are transitioning those folks out of doing the same thing twice over and into the field. And that's my focus right now. And the move of the FBI headquarters is also going to save the FBI $3.5 billion in the American taxpayers. So we're focused on eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. And as I told Senator Graham, if I'll go back and talk to my team, and if we need more, we'll let you know.
Are you planning any additional reductions in force, Director?
No.
How many vacancies are you currently trying to fill within the agency?
In terms of the 1811 ranks, there's a few hundred open vacancies that we have funded. And so we're filling all of those with our hybrid 1811 program and our new recruitment program, and I think a lesser amount of IAs and SOS.
So if hundreds of agents have retired or taken the fork in the road offer, and you have vacancies, but you're requesting $500 million less, how does having fewer FBI agents help you tackle violent crime and address our national security issues?
Just to put it in perspective, Senator, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. If we had this $500 million, we've done the math. It would take us 14 years to onboard every vacancy that's on the books currently at the FBI, because we can't hire these folks and train them overnight. It's a years-long process. So we are currently focused on recruiting the best and filling the positions to the best of our needs. And we, even if we had this extra money, wouldn't be able to hire them overnight. We're looking for where the need is greatest, where in the country we need to send them, and how we can change the training requirements, which is why I'm thrilled to have police officers. They might not have a college degree, but they got the street smarts and the cop smarts to become FBI agents, and that's what we want.
Let me turn to Section 702.
Yes,
when you testified in front of the CJS subcommittee, we talked about this issue. You told me you were in favor of reauthorizing FISA Section 702 when it expires next year,
right,
so long as the reforms implemented last year, reforms like better training for agents and real consequences for inappropriate searches of Americans' communications, were maintained. You also said that you had some ideas about how to make Section 702 better going forward. Can you give me an update on the FBI's implementation of these reforms and the direction you think it should go?
Absolutely. I think you're referring to the query process, and if you're not, let me know. But any instance of abuse or mistakes that were made in the query process have now been changed. It used to be you can make multiple mistakes and continue to access the query database system. I've changed that. If you make a mistake, you're immediately sidelined, a review is conducted, and if it was an actual mistake, i.e., there should have been S on the end of that name and there wasn't, then we put you back in. But we have to review those matters. So that's happening. And if there was an intentional mistake, you have no more access to the 702 query system and its database. So we've also done an audit of the entire 702 system and the query databases, and now we are nearly 100% of the audit. And I think we found one or two, I'll have to get back to you, quote unquote mistakes within that system, which are currently being reviewed.
Thank you. You had told me in May that you'd send me updated statistics about the Section 702 searches of Americans' data. I haven't received it. When will I get that?
I'll work with my team to get that to you, Senator.
And frankly, in May, when you were testifying that you were implementing these reforms, you were also closing down the Office of Internal Auditing at the FBI. Now, that was the office created in the first Trump administration to improve the Bureau's compliance with Section 702. How is that working out? How can you continue to advocate for robust civil liberty protections but shut down the office that was created to enforce those safeguards? Help me understand this.
Absolutely, Senator. This is a great example of sort of duplicative work. There was two divisions in the FBI working on this, And all we did was the inspection division, which is the leader in this query system and this audit system, has now been given the single source mandate to conduct these. So the OIA, its elimination is just taking folks who were working there and were experts in it and folded in under the inspection division, and then taking other folks that we didn't need because we had enough manpower and pushing them elsewhere in the FBI.
I'm concerned about the rise in threats against members of our judiciary. What are you
Yes, sir.
doing with the U.S. Marshal Service to help protect our federal judges and with state and local judicial systems to help provide some of the expertise of the FBI in protecting them as well?
I share your concern, Senator. We have 35 open investigations, 17 against federal judges, and the remainder against state court judges and threats that they have received. And as you know, federally, there's a specific statute which prohibits that. So we are working up those cases and referring them to prosecution where we can meet the threshold for evidence.
In your written testimony, you referenced how counter-UAS legislation expires and we need to resolve the conflict in jurisdiction and authority. I agree, this is an urgent concern. I have heard from state and local law enforcement about it, from the folks responsible for major events, whether it's sports or concerts or public events. Given the tragic increase in political violence, I'm very concerned about the misuse of drones and the potential of there being a catastrophic event. What could we do to address this challenge?
Well, obviously, reauthorizing the capabilities that we have under the Counter-UAS program. But just to highlight what the FBI is specifically doing, we've been given the mandate to work with DHS to secure not just the Club World Cup that we had, by the way, which occurred in 32 matches across the country without any significant incident, which we're proud of, and we're taking that model for the next World Cup and also the Olympics. But the reason I bring that up is because we pushed out our counter-UAS programs to address the security needs, and that's where our focus is on events like that.
Mr. Director, thank you for your testimony. I look forward to working on actually solving criminal problems and reducing the extent to which what we're going back and forth about is more political and partisan point scoring and more actually solving crimes for the American people.
Yes, sir.
Senator Kennedy.
It was about whether the nation's most powerful law enforcement agency is quietly being reshaped into something it was never meant to be. Director Patel, Coons began. You told me in your confirmation hearing that there would be no politicization of the FBI, no retribution, no loyalty tests. But since you took over, that promise looks broken. And just like that, the air in the chamber changed. The senator didn't shout. He didn't grandstand. He simply read Patel's own words back to him, line by line, forcing him to confront the gap between what he said and what he's done. Coons wasn't just questioning Patel's leadership. He was putting the soul of the FBI on trial. Because here's what's happened since that promise was made. Senior officials who worked on politically sensitive investigations have vanished, forced out, sidelined, or quietly encouraged to retire. Lawsuits have already been filed claiming political retaliation. And those still inside the bureau say morale is collapsing, that the FBI's culture of independence is being replaced by fear. Hundreds of agents have resigned. Hiring standards have been lowered. Programs once dedicated to tracking domestic extremism have been gutted. And then there's the budget cut. $500 million slashed from the very agency tasked with protecting the country from terror, espionage, and cyber attacks. Patel's defense? That it was about eliminating waste. But Coons wasn't buying it. You're cutting resources, he said. At the same time, you're losing your most experienced agents. How does that make America safer? Patel didn't have an answer. He talked about efficiency, about streamlining. He said duplication was being reduced and contracts consolidated. But none of that explained the timing or the deeper motive. Because to those watching closely, this wasn't just about cutting fat. It looked like a slow dismantling of the FBI's independence, piece by piece, under the banner of reform. And here's where it gets even more unsettling. While Coons pressed for answers, Patel admitted that he had dissolved the Office of Integrity and Compliance, the very watchdog department designed to ensure ethical behavior within the FBI. He called it duplication. But think about that. The director of the FBI eliminated the office that polices internal misconduct, folding its duties into his own chain of command. That's like removing the referee in the middle of a championship game and asking the players to call their own fouls. Coons didn't let it slide. He kept pressing, calmly but relentlessly. Director, you promised no retaliation. So can you say under oath that no FBI employee was terminated for working on investigations connected to the former president? Patel hesitated. Those matters are part of ongoing litigation, he said. I can't comment. That silence said everything. Because if nothing improper happened, why not say it outright? Why hide behind legal language? When you lead an institution built on public trust, avoiding transparency is the surest way to destroy it. And Coons knew it. He wasn't trying to score points. He was drawing a line. Either the FBI remains accountable to the law, or it becomes accountable to power. But that wasn't the only contradiction hanging in the air. A few months before this hearing, Patel had testified to another congressional committee, this time defending a proposal to slash the FBI's budget by hundreds of millions. The next day, before a separate committee, he said the opposite, that the Bureau needed more resources. Two different stories in two different rooms. Which one was true? Coons demanded an explanation. Patel insisted the numbers were consistent with the president's overall request, and that his focus was on efficiency. But the math didn't lie. Fewer agents, less funding, and a growing number of threats that demand more, not less, federal manpower. It didn't add up. Then came the question that cut deeper than all the rest. Director, Coons asked, how does reducing staff and lowering standards protect Americans from rising domestic threats? That question hung heavy because the answer was obvious. It doesn't. You can't fight 21st century dangers with a shrinking 20th century playbook. Yet that's exactly what Patel's version of reform seemed to be doing, reducing oversight, slashing budgets, and reassigning agents away from core national security missions. And as Coons pushed through each contradiction, a bigger picture began to emerge, one that raised uncomfortable questions about the direction of the entire Bureau. For decades, the FBI has built its reputation on independence. It's supposed to be insulated from political winds, answerable to the law and the Constitution, not to the preferences of any one administration. But the changes Patel defended, whether intentional or not, painted a picture of an agency being bent, slowly but unmistakably, toward political loyalty. Now think about what that means. If agents begin to believe their careers depend not on their performance, but on their political alignment, the entire structure collapses. Justice can't exist where fear dictates behavior. Independence isn't just an ideal, it's the foundation of trust. Once that's gone, every investigation, every prosecution, every decision becomes suspect. And that's exactly what Coons was warning about. He wasn't just protecting the FBI's reputation. He was protecting its purpose. Because the moment the public believes the Bureau serves a political agenda instead of the rule of law, its authority dissolves. No badge, no budget, no field office can replace the credibility lost when truth itself becomes partisan. Yet Patel's testimony seemed to blur those lines further. When questioned about ongoing threats to judges and public officials, he cited statistics but offered little reassurance about how his leadership would restore the FBI's balance. Even his updates on surveillance reform, like Section 702 of FISA, sounded less like transparency and more like damage control. The office once dedicated to preventing misuse of surveillance powers shut down. Its staff reassigned. Oversight merged under the same department it was supposed to monitor. To the public, that might sound like bureaucratic housekeeping. But inside Washington, it sends a very different message. Fewer eyes watching, fewer checks on power, more control at the top, and the timing couldn't be more dangerous. Political threats are rising. Disinformation campaigns are accelerating. Extremism is adapting faster than policy can respond. This is not the moment for the FBI to weaken its internal guardrails. Yet under Patel, that's exactly what seems to be happening. When Coons asked if he planned further reductions, Patel said no, but then admitted there were hundreds of vacancies. He explained it would take years to train new agents, and that the Bureau was now recruiting local police officers without college degrees to fill the gap. On paper, it's a quick fix. In reality, it signals desperation. Because once the hiring bar drops, experience and judgment go with it. And those are the traits that make federal investigations credible in the first place. So where does that leave us? A director defending cuts and consolidations while denying politicization. A senator demanding accountability while being met with evasions. And a country watching its premier law enforcement agency drift into uncertainty. The truth is, Coons's questioning wasn't just about the budget or personnel. It was about the direction of the FBI itself. Is it still the independent guardian of justice it was designed to be? Or is it becoming another arm of political influence? That's why this moment matters. Because once public faith in the FBI breaks, it doesn't come back easily. Every investigation it touches becomes political by default. Every conviction becomes suspect. Every whistleblower becomes a target. And if you think that sounds exaggerated, look at history. The fall of trust in any institution begins the same way, quietly. Small shifts that seem procedural at first. Leadership reshuffles framed as efficiency. Budget cuts disguised as reform. Offices merged, oversight reduced, and before anyone notices, the system no longer serves the people. It serves the powerful. That's what Senator Coons was fighting against in that hearing. Not just for an answer from Patel, but for the principle that justice should never depend on politics. He was reminding everyone watching that the oath taken under fluorescent Senate lights still means something. Or at least, it should. And maybe that's why this exchange hit so hard. Because it wasn't a shouting match or a viral soundbite. It was something deeper. A mirror moment. One where Patel had to look at his own record and see whether it reflected the independence he promised or the influence he denied. For the millions of Americans who depend on the FBI to remain impartial, to investigate corruption, terrorism, trafficking, and espionage. This question isn't academic. It's existential. Can the Bureau still be trusted to pursue truth wherever it leads? Or has it become another casualty of political warfare? And the answer doesn't come from one man's testimony. It comes from whether the institution can survive the storm without losing its soul. Because if the FBI becomes just another partisan battlefield, the damage won't stop at politics. It will reach into every corner of public life, where justice once stood above ideology. As that hearing wrapped, Coons didn't declare victory. He didn't grandstand. He simply thanked Patel and reminded him, and the nation, that this debate isn't about party lines or power struggles. It's about something far simpler, whether Americans can still believe in fairness. And that's the part of the story that lingers long after the cameras stop rolling. The realization that the strength of democracy doesn't rest in buildings or budgets. It rests in trust. And when trust is compromised, so is everything built upon it. Because when a promise made under oath begins to crack, it's not just one man's integrity at stake. It's the foundation of justice itself. If you've watched this far, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you believe the FBI can still operate independently, or has it drifted too far into political control? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives that go beyond headlines and reveal the stories behind these confrontations, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications, because the next hearing might just change everything you thought you knew about power, politics, and justice.